Hello, I'm Kerwin Gaines, and this is The Agenda. Today, we're joined by a voice of leadership in uncertain times, Ms. Tynetta Brown, President and CEO of Philanthropy Delaware. Philanthropy Delaware doesn't write checks or process grants. What it does is bring funders together with a purpose. As a nonprofit membership or association, it equips Delaware's philanthropic community to invest strategically, act in collaboration, and stay informed on the needs that matter to the most to Delawareans. From federal funding cuts and new executive orders to tax policies that threaten the very structure of giving, today's conversation is about more than charity. It's about strategy, I would say resilience, and what comes next. Hey, excited to be here on The Agenda with you all today to talk to Ms. Tynetta Brown. And she is a common face around here in Wilmington because you cannot go through an event. I danced with her on Dancing with the Stars without seeing Ms. Tynetta Brown. Welcome to The Agenda.
Thank you, Kerwin.
Thank you so much for being here. Although we didn't win, we gave it a heck of a shot.
We did, all for charity.
All for charity on 1 and 3. I think we were 1-3. I think that
exactly.
was that categorizes.
We can stay in Wilmington.
We
so
can
we're
stay.
good.
Absolutely. But here, all jokes aside, we're talking about your organization, which you are the CEO of. Please tell us a little bit more about it.
Essentially, as you noted, we are a membership association of the philanthropic or funding community, statewide, of course, and we are a part of a national network, the United Philanthropy Forum. So there is a equivalent, if you will, to Philanthropy Delaware across our country. Grant makers in the arts, grant makers in health, grant makers in aging, as well as Philanthropy New York, Philanthropy Colorado. And our entire mission, of course, is bringing the funding community together to look at where there are opportunities to collaborate, where there are opportunities to make investments, looking at community needs, of course, and aligning with that. We have corporate, family, and private foundations as members.
Yeah, and some people may think, Kerwin, what does this have to do with legislation? Your show deals with politics, your show deals with all this, but let me tell you something right now, Ms. Brown. Private funding is a need because government funding seems to be going away for anything that, in my opinion, and I could be biased, and I am biased, anything that supports people, it seems as though this administration is pulling away from. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, it's unfortunate that the federal cuts across contracts and grants are really heavily impacting our nonprofit community, which is, of course, whom our members, fund as grantees, and the due diligence behind those cuts, of course, not done in some cases, and it does leave our communities, in an lurch, if you will, because now they're having to respond to how to still deliver on mission, whether it's homelessness, feeding hungry citizens, or even educating youth after school. Now they're having to course correct and make adjustments, whether the funding returns or not. Is kind of leaving folks in limbo. And therefore, the philanthropic community is assessing how can we help. There's not enough resource, of course, to help, but where can we, the critical needs and who determines critical needs and coming together to assess those is kind of where we, are now.
Let me give you a term.
Yes.
A term that you may be familiar with, and that is purposeful philanthropy.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit more about this, because it seems like we have to be targeted now in what we're doing.
Yes, when I, 4.5 years ago, I've been in the seat as president and CEO, and I typically try to come up with themes for our member convenings and evolve that purposeful philanthropy about 2 years ago, because we do need our, philanthropy dollars to stretch and, of course, be intentional and be strategic, but over the long term have some long-term sustaining impact. And so when you're making investments as you would in a personal portfolio, you want to leverage those to the highest degree that you can. And our whole intent in being purposeful or encouraging purposeful philanthropy is to get the highest and best use of those resources because they are so limited.
So I think just my common mind in regards to this, because I'm not familiar in this world, but it seems as though there needs to be like some type of education or like strategy to those big philanthropic organizations to get them to that point.
So as a part of being a member of Philanthropy Delaware, membership is based on annual giving in our state. That's how the dues are paid accordingly, based on how you give. And to that end, we do education sessions, we call them philanthropic educational sessions, on the various topics of concern and need across the community, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's gun violence, and does philanthropy have a role in helping mitigate some of those challenges? So we bring together those who are doing active boots on the ground work across these various areas and sharing with our members where the needs are, the outcomes of the work that they have done to date, and where they could use further philanthropic support. For example, with human trafficking, when someone is rescued from trafficking, they need to get their GED or education. They need to have their records expunged because of crimes they may have committed, under duress, and they need shelter, they need housing and jobs. So are there areas that our members could fund, to help those nonprofit organizations deliver those services or direct services to those folks? Yeah. So that's essentially where we educate them, and they make the decision independently based on their strategic imperatives, of course, if they are able to support those nonprofits that are doing the work across those areas, human trafficking, addressing gun violence, or food insecurity.
So when I'm thinking of all those issues, that sounds like a national thing. Like you're bringing in more than one organization using monies from all over. Am I reading that right or no?
The philanthropic dollars that our members allocate are expressly for Delaware.
Okay.
We, if the nonprofit themselves get funding outside of Delaware, that is incumbent upon their leadership, their development director, et cetera. But our members strictly fund Delaware needs. It's sometimes emergent, sometimes urgent. During the hurricane, and of course, COVID-19 was urgent. And
you were busy.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, I had joined the organization months after the start of COVID, but Delaware Community Foundation, United Way of Delaware, DANA, the Alliance of Nonprofit Advancement, and Philanthropy Delaware came together to evolve an approach by which we could help solve some of the emergent needs that are transpired during COVID, keeping daycares open, providing personal protective masks, et cetera, pushing out information on where people could get shots. But resources were allocated collectively from funders in a pool. And over 2 years of COVID, 20 to 22, there was at least over $5 million that went out every week to support those urgent and emergent needs of our community. Basic needs, of course, food, clothing, shelter.
Was this federal funding or was this private funding?
This was philanthropic dollars predominantly, but alongside those philanthropic dollars, of course, as you saw, our state government was also funding, the vaccination sites and things of that nature too. They were also putting in dollars. And with the current climate now, with the executive orders, federal contract, and federal grant cuts, the silver bullet is not that same approach as COVID-19 because the government money is not there to come alongside the resources that philanthropy may have or may not have, to support some of the emergent needs, such as the Food Bank of Delaware when the trucks were canceled, or other needs that have come across the Department of Justice cuts, the Health and Human Services cuts across substance use, mental health. So those government dollars aren't there now fully to come alongside philanthropy. And as you know, philanthropic dollars that are invested typically come from, growth of portfolios, et cetera. So those resources are there typically to also augment giving. So there's greater demand, greater applications coming into our members, and of course, greater need, less dollars.
So while we're talking about less dollars, what are some of the issues that your funders are facing right now?
Well, in this current climate, there's always, never enough money to go around even prior to COVID, prior to this crisis. But currently, at the federal level with the budget now, I just think I read that it has passed through one hurdle or passed, and I think it's off to the Senate next. But the Charitable Tax Act, for example, enhancing that. Currently, those that meet a certain threshold in their charitable giving do have an opportunity to write it off. but there's a charitable tax act expansion that we're advocating for nationally. Senator Coons and Senator Langford co-sponsored this bill to enhance it so that everyday average folks who are also charitable can at least get $150 as a single filer, and I think maybe $250 as a joint filer, for those charitable contributions that they make as well. So we are in support of, that enhancement. But secondarily to that is the intent to raise the tax penalty, I guess, if you would, or the spend up to 10% from the typical. You have to spend 5% of your portfolio in giving each year, and they want to raise that to 10%. Of course, we're not in support of that. Nationally, our United Philanthropy Forum has stated that that is not of preference, of course, because that could very well impact giving. Right. And then I believe and
has that been their response to these executive orders? Like, what has been
So our national office, Council on Foundations, which is a national entity as well. And so there are several stakeholders nationally who, of course, are making the phone calls, writing the letters, and, of course, certainly against that particular provision. And we, in each of our states, are asked to also sign on or support and call and do the very same, as well as ask that of our members. Mm-hmm. So being careful a little bit, because there are some who...
It's still political.
Yeah, it's still political. And there are also some who may be in support of some of these cuts, et cetera. So I have to kind of, walk that fine line. We're evolving public policy engagement, things that I do sign on to that make sense, like let philanthropy do their job. Mm-hmm. So common statements are released. And so that's been our response. And we have action committees nationally. And the action committees from the standpoint of let's galvanize common message, have a strategy to make sure that our folks are aware of what's happening in the space and how it will affect ultimately our communities through the nonprofit work that is funded through philanthropy.
So, I mean, how is the agency doing? We're going to be okay?
Well, as a nonprofit membership association, that's membership, as I say, but we do evolve and get support for some programs we're trying to do now. For example, we're a 3-county state, urban, suburban, rural. We are trying to focus more on our rural counties, Kent and Sussex, to get more philanthropic dollars there. So, funding support from some of my members to begin to evolve that work and bring more attention to the needs of our lower counties, which are just the same as Newcastle County.
Absolutely.
The violence, the shootings, et cetera, the poverty, the food insecurity. So we're just trying to elevate the needs for Kent and Sussex County and, bringing to the attention of our membership that those things transpire. Secondarily, we're also trying to, while the funding community, they're my primary constituents as members, we also try to support the grantees of our members, those nonprofit organizations. So we offer sessions, Philanthropy 101 and ways to help shore up how they secure funding beyond just, writing grants to our members, but also looking outside, diversifying where you're getting your funding from. And I think this timing now, more than ever, is forcing a lot of our nonprofits, as well as the funding community, to really course correct and do some scenario planning, around if the dollars stay, if the dollars don't ever come back, how are we going to mitigate against that? So we push out those resources from our key stakeholder, DANA, the Delaware Alliance for Nonprofit Advancement, around scenario planning, around, is there an opportunity to merge? As nonprofits.
Is that the advice that you would give to some of the nonprofits that are out there? So say there's a nonprofit now that's doing great work in the city, but doesn't participate with Dana, that doesn't, come to your information sessions, but they are working together, small mom and pop shops. What advice would you have for them?
So we do try to support, those opportunities to help those emerging, evolving grassroots nonprofit organizations grow. But I think in this climate, I addressed an after-school summit a couple of weeks ago, and there were maybe 30, 40 after-school programs from across our state in the room. And I think the challenge is going to be the philanthropic community can't fund them all. But, I encourage opportunities to look at where can you collaborate? If one nonprofit, for example, has a strong back office, from the finance and finance and development, marketing.
You'd team it together.
Yeah, that's, right now I think they're going to have to begin to look at that. And Dana, as the nonprofit association, is providing those resources to look at where you can, potentially work together more. Our funders do look for collaboration across sectors, whether it's after school, whether it's health, education. We do, we have funder panels, and those are the opportunities to kind of look for where can you collaborate, who are you currently collaborating, which maximizes resources too, particularly those that may not be replaced.
So I don't believe that your mission has changed, but the outlook, I would say, for an increase that our administration is going to change its mind and choose a different path is really non-existent, right? So has your organization thought about changing its mission, or has there been any type of scope change?
Not in a major way. We're continually monitoring, and every Monday, the Delaware Community Foundation, United Way of Delaware, Dana, and we meet every Monday in the event that something has evolved, something is impending, getting press releases or statements ready as a collective, and just to be able to even respond within our own organizations, but as a group around how we, support what the Attorney General is doing in terms of the various lawsuits and keeping up with that and keeping our nonprofit grantees informed. So that's so we have a collective voice there. But our mission basically is still informing the philanthropic community where those dire, and you don't always want to say dire, because philanthropically supporting work to support our community and address the needs so that the needs aren't so dire in the future. So we continue to bring the members together. I'll get if an issue comes across their desk from a grantee that they weren't mindful of, they may want to, advise that we share it with everyone. For example, the human trafficking issue. I didn't know it was as bad as it was in Delaware a couple of years ago. And a couple of
here in Delaware.
Yes, here in Delaware. And so a couple of our funders were getting applications from nonprofits who work in that space. And so we did a 2-hour education session just on that. So we do education sessions prompted by, current emergent needs, so that as they're making their funding decisions, when they're reviewing an application, their support and information, they've been informed that, yes, this is a need, not an arbitrary ask. So essentially, no, we are still trying to support our members as they support their grantees. So, and then being mindful of the public policy framework that our national umbrella network is also evolving, as well as our peers.
So right now, I'm thinking of what's vital, and what are the private-public partnerships right now that are vital? So
for us too, even more vital, particularly as a result of the current administration in Washington's approach to federal cuts and what have you, is more importantly than ever to have that public-private philanthropy and government being lockstep in terms of future forward, where our resources go. Can we help inform based on what philanthropy's been funding, based on what the government in the future may be able to continue to fund, whether it's through grant and aid, whether it's the prescription opioid allocations that are coming up. How can we help inform where some of those dollars may go, or just give the philanthropic lens so that there is the highest and best use of all those resources that do remain in our state. And so we're in constant communication through the 4 organizations mentioned earlier with, our governor's administration, and we're also looking at municipal and county level engagement too, so that as resources come into our state to address community needs, that philanthropy is brought to the table. So nationally, my peers, there's about 7 or 8 case studies where philanthropy and government have worked successfully together for many years. And so our current government at all 3 levels see the logic in philanthropy and government, being lockstep and communicating with one another as to how, the needs evolve and how they're addressed, with the resources we have. And of course, we're watching JFC markup and the budget, however that lands, shortfall or not, and where those resources can go. So we constantly monitor that and communicate that so that our membership has a good picture of where the resources are in our state to collectively, address needs in our communities.
So what advice, I know we've, not to be redundant, but in closing, I want for them to hear it from you. What advice would you give to nonprofits right now seeking funding?
I would really do that examination and take advantage of the tools. Delaware Community Foundation is now offering up to $20,000 to nonprofits to apply to use those dollars to find a consultant to help them determine, do they restructure, what it looks like and how they operate path forward. So I believe that grant application is due at the end of May. So any resources on our website, philanthropydelaware.org, we have a tab for grant seekers. And within that tab for grant seekers, we do have all the varying resources and monitoring of what the executive orders, where they've moved or shifted, where the lawsuits have shifted, legal advice.
Yeah.
Making sure your affairs are in order from your 990s, your tax filings, everything is in order. The thing that I think has people in panic is these aren't laws, written laws or constitutional laws, these, cuts and things that are happening in the executive orders. But people, of course, respond accordingly, scrubbing websites and things of that nature, anything DEI related. Just not to panic as a nonprofit, but an examination does need to be done because we do have a number of them in our state. Where are there opportunities to leverage the resources, whether it's human or financial capital that we do have? And then philanthropy, of course, can come alongside that to support, what those critical needs are. So just really just not being frantic, the sky's falling kind of a response, but just be deliberate in how you plan for, the future of your organization. And philanthropy is, paying attention to where that lands.
Yeah, and I know you have to be agnostic in regards to some of this, and you run a very difficult line. But do you think that some of these cuts really shows what these companies are, who these companies are, what the government is, like that they really don't care for people when they pull back all these funds, or is it just kind of going with the status quo?
You mean companies as in my philanthropic?
Let's just say we can say generic company, yes, right? Yes. Generic company X now is not supporting DEI. It's not doing this, it's not doing that.
Well, I again, if you look at the mission of a good percentage of the nonprofits that exist in this country, their mission is driven around those components of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, whether you're disabled, whether you're a senior, whether you're a youth, whether you're a male or a female. So to say no DEI related work when, people struggle with, okay, well, how do I continue to serve my mission? And I guess the corporations, maybe their examination of it's good business to diversify the communities that your folks are working in and playing in and worshiping in, to support those various diversity, equity, and inclusive, populations wherever you're located. So I think there's a way to still do the work without, you may not have to call out the acronym, but I think the work can and should still continue because that is pretty much the heft of why nonprofits were established. To a
Those
certain
acronyms
degree.
scare people, don't they?
Yeah, and they stop at race, unfortunately, versus evolving how you define. I mean, there's so many families, wealthy, middle class, and poor, who have disabled adults and children that need care. And that additional support, whether it be from government, private funding, whatever it may be, is critical to someone's existence in some cases. So the retrenchment in some cases of scrubbing websites and the ads that were taken out previously in 2020 during the racial justice raising, if you will, during George Floyd's unfortunate death. All that came forward, we're in support of, but it was still maybe race driven, I don't know. But I think the diversity of this country, warrants still staying in that space. Yeah. However you articulate it or express it or support it. But we'll see where it all falls out because it would be unfortunate to, I think, totally retrench. And how can you? Because as I say, most nonprofits exist to support needs and efforts across those communities, across those dimensions of DEI, if you will. So.
Ms. Tynetta Brown, thank you. First time on the agenda.
You're
Hope it's
welcome.
not the last
No,
time
sir. Thank
on
you
the
for
agenda.
having me.
If there's anything you need from us to get the information out, please continue to keep that communication line open.
Most certainly.
Until then, I'll see you on the dance floor.
On the dance floor.
On
We'll
the
try it
dance
again.
We'll try it again. God, I hope not. What we've heard today wasn't just a breakdown of philanthropic landscape. It was a call to arms. Tynetta Brown reminded us that while the needs in our communities are rising, the resources are not. Frankly, they're disappearing. The kind of unified response we saw during the early days of COVID, the alignment between philanthropy and government, is just no longer feasible. And it lacks real structural support. But that doesn't mean we throw in the towel. It means we rethink the playbook. With federal contracts on the chopping block, charitable tax policies under threat, and the future of nonprofit status hanging in the balance, it's important for us, I'll say it again, to double down, not just with dollars, but with strategy. Philanthropy cannot replace government, but what it can do and must do is work alongside it. And when it does, as Philanthropy Delaware has shown, the impact is not just felt, it's multiplied. To Tynetta Brown, first of all, thank you for your clarity and your conviction. But to our viewers, the conversation doesn't end here. Stay informed, help your neighbors, and frankly, just be a good person. Thank you for watching. As always, be safe. Come back and join us for more information, more conversations right here on the agenda.